I always thought family was supposed to have your back. I grew up believing that no matter what, my parents would support me, encourage me, and celebrate my successes. But I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. They didn't just betray me, they stole everything I had, every bit of security, every ounce of my hard work, and left me with nothing. And the worst part? They acted like it was their right to do so. Let me back up a little. My name is Alex, and for most of my life I worked my ass off. I wasn't born into wealth, far from it. My parents were always struggling with money, constantly making bad financial decisions, and somehow the burden always fell on me. Even as a kid, I had to be understanding whenever they couldn't afford something for me. New shoes? Nope. A school trip? Not happening. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Evan, seemed to have everything handed to him. Brand new gaming consoles, the best clothes, private tutoring. I convinced myself that it was just the way things were. Maybe I was just more independent, as my mom liked to say. Alex doesn't need much, she would tell people with a laugh. He's a hard worker. She wasn't wrong about that part. I worked my way through college, juggling multiple part-time jobs while studying. I was determined to build a stable future, one where I wouldn't have to rely on anyone, especially my parents. By the time I graduated, I had managed to save a decent amount of money. Not life-changing, but enough to start my own business. And that's exactly what I did. I put every dime into launching a small but promising startup. It took years of grinding, long nights, and countless sacrifices, but eventually, it paid off. By the time I hit my late 20s, my business was thriving. I had more money than I ever imagined growing up. I wasn't rich by billionaire standards, but for someone who had once counted every dollar, I felt like I had finally made it. I thought my parents would be proud of me. I thought they'd finally see that all those years of struggle had led to something worthwhile. Instead, they saw an opportunity. It started small. My mom would casually mention how tough things were for them financially. My dad would sigh dramatically about how hard it was to make ends meet. Then came the guilt trips. "After everything we did for you, Alex," my mother would say, voice heavy with disappointment. "We sacrificed so much." At first, I helped. I sent money here and there, paid off a few of their bills. But it was never enough. They always needed more. And when I finally set boundaries, that's when everything changed. One day I checked my accounts, and something was off. Money was missing. A lot of money. Tens of thousands of dollars. Gone. At first, I thought it was a banking error, but as I started digging, a sickening realization settled in my gut. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a hacker. It was them. My own parents had drained my accounts. And the reason? Because they believed they were entitled to it. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just dealing with selfish parents. I was dealing with thieves. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. To say I was in shock would be an understatement. My own parents had stolen from me, not borrowed, not asked for help, stolen. I sat there, staring at my bank statements, my heart pounding in my chest. Transactions I didn't recognize, large sums transferred out in increments over months, sometimes even years. How had I not noticed? Because I trusted them. Because despite everything, I still believed they were my family. The first thing I did was call my mom. No answer. Then my dad. Straight to voicemail. My hands were shaking as I typed out a message. Me. "Did you take money from my account?" I watched the 3 little dots pop up. Then they disappeared. Then they popped up again. And finally, "Mom, sweetheart, we need to talk about this. Not a denial, not an apology, just that." I drove straight to their house, my mind racing. Maybe they'd explain. Maybe there was some mistake. Maybe dash. Number I knew better. When I got there, they weren't panicking. They weren't even ashamed. My mom sat at the kitchen table, sipping her tea, while my dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed like I was the one being unreasonable. "I was going to tell you," my mom started, like that made it okay. "But you've been so busy." I slammed the bank statements onto the table. "How could you do this?" My dad scoffed. "Watch your tone, Alex. We're still your parents." I felt like I was losing my mind. "That's my money, everything I worked for." My mother sighed, setting down her cup. Alex, honey, you wouldn't have had any of this if not for us. We raised you, we took care of you. You wouldn't be where you are today without our sacrifices. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sacrifices? You mean all those years of favoritism toward Evan, making me fend for myself while he got everything handed to him? At the mention of my younger brother, my mom's expression hardened. Don't bring Evan into this. Of course, Evan, the golden child, the real reason they drained my accounts. You took my money for him, didn't you? I spat. That's what this is really about. Silence. I turned to my dad. Tell me I'm wrong. He didn't. Instead, my mom spoke up. Your brother needed help, Alex. His future is important too. My stomach twisted. I already knew what she was going to say next. He's starting a business, she continued, her voice sweet, like she actually expected me to be happy about it. And we thought, since you're doing so well, you wouldn't mind helping your brother get on his feet. Helping, I repeated, my voice cold. You stole from me. Dad rolled his eyes. Don't be so dramatic. I felt like I was about to explode. My parents had drained my accounts, not because they were struggling, not because they were on the verge of losing their home, but because they wanted to fund my brother's business venture. The same brother who had never worked a day in his life. The same brother who had laughed at me for grinding so hard while he coasted through life, leeching off our parents. The same brother who had once told me, must be nice to be so obsessed with money, when I was working 3 jobs in college. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. You had no right to do this. My mother frowned like I was being unreasonable. We're family, Alex. We share everything. We don't. They had stolen from me, and they didn't even feel guilty about it. If anything, they were justified in their own minds. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't trust them. Not anymore. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let them get away with this. I walked out of my parents' house that day with one thing on my mind. They think they won. They thought I would roll over and accept it because family helps family. Because they had spent years conditioning me to feel like I owed them everything. They had no idea what was coming. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't even argue anymore. I simply turned around, walked out the door, and let them believe they had gotten away with it. But inside, I was already planning. I spent the next few days combing through my finances. The truth was, while they had drained a lot of money, they hadn't taken everything. I had a separate emergency fund, one they didn't know about. I also had assets, stocks, investments, things that couldn't be accessed without my direct authorization. But what really pissed me off? They had forged my signature to take what they did. That was a crime, not a family misunderstanding. Not something I could just let go. A full-blown case of fraud. I dug deeper. My brother, Evan, had apparently launched his business a few months ago. A luxury sneaker resale brand, or more accurately, a money pit. He had no experience, no business plan, and was burning through cash like it was monopoly money. He had hired a team of his equally clueless friends, rented an expensive office space, and started throwing ridiculous amounts of money into marketing campaigns that led nowhere. And guess whose money had funded all of it? I needed evidence, something solid, something undeniable. So I played dumb. I texted my mom a few days later. Hey, I overreacted. I just needed some time to process things. 3 little dots popped up immediately. Mom, I knew you'd understand, sweetheart. We're family after all. We always support each other. Oh yeah, I understood, all right. I asked her to meet me for lunch, just the 2 of us. I needed to hear her say it again, needed to record it. I knew she'd slip up. My mother loved to talk, and even more than that, she loved to justify her actions. So, over coffee and pastries, I played the role of the forgiving son. I just want to know how everything happened, I said, keeping my tone light. I mean, how did you even access my accounts? And just like I expected, she bragged. Oh, it wasn't hard, she said with a laugh. You left some old paperwork at the house a while ago. Your signatures, banking info, I just used that. She said it so casually, like she hadn't just admitted to committing fraud. Like it was nothing. I pressed her for details, nodding along as she incriminated herself more and more. My phone, recording the entire conversation from my pocket, caught every word. By the time we left that cafe, I had everything I needed. Step 1. Gather evidence. Done. Now, it was time for step 2. I needed to take my money back, and I knew exactly where to start. I contacted a lawyer specializing in fraud cases. I presented every document, every statement, and most importantly, the recording of my mother admitting to forging my signature. My lawyer's reaction? This is an open and shut case. But I didn't just want them to pay legally, I wanted them to feel it. So I took things a step further. I found out that my brother's business was running on my money alone. No other investors, no other sources of funding. Which meant, the moment I pulled my money out, everything would collapse. It was time to let them feel the consequences. I knew exactly when to strike. My parents and Evan had no clue I was onto them. They were still living in their little bubble, thinking they had won. So, I let them have one last taste of their so-called victory. The perfect opportunity came when Evan decided to host a big launch party for his business. He had invited influencers, investors, and even some local press. It was all about making a statement, showing off his success. And me? I was about to burn it all to the ground. Phase 1. The financial collapse. 3 days before the party, I met with my lawyer and officially filed charges against my parents for fraud. My bank was notified, and within 24 hours their accounts were frozen pending investigation. Every dime they had stolen was flagged. The transactions that drained my accounts, illegally processed. And just like that, they were broke. Their credit cards declined, their accounts locked. And worst of all, every penny funneled into Evan's business was now under legal scrutiny. I didn't tell them, not yet. I wanted them to realize it themselves. Phase 2. The public exposure. The day of the party, I walked in like a guest, dressed sharp, blending in with the crowd. Evan was in the center, basking in the attention, his ego inflated like a hot air balloon. He was talking big, going on about how his company was about to disrupt the industry. I let him talk, let him think he was on top of the world. Then, right when he was about to make his big announcement, I made my move. I stepped up to the mic. "Hey everyone," I said, my voice calm, confident. "I just wanted to say a few words about this amazing company. You see, I think it's incredible what Evan has managed to do, considering he built all of this with stolen money." The room went silent. Evan's smile froze. My parents, standing near the back, looked like they had seen a ghost. I continued, pulling out printed bank statements. For those who don't know, Evan's business was entirely funded by money that was stolen from me. My own parents committed fraud, forging my signature to drain my accounts. I held up my phone, where the recording of my mother's confession was playing. Her voice echoed through the speakers, admitting everything. Gasps, whispers, shock. Investors started pulling out their phones, checking their emails, realizing their investments were about to go up in flames. Evan turned to our parents, panicking, "Mom, Dad." But my parents couldn't say anything. They knew. They were caught. Phase 3. The ultimate consequences. Security was called. My lawyer, who was already present, handed out legal notices. My parents, facing fraud charges. Evan, financially ruined. His business, over before it even began. And the best part? Because they had forged my signature on multiple documents, the courts ruled that every contract tied to Evan's company was null and void. Vendors dropped him, sponsors pulled out, employees left immediately. By the time the night was over, Evan's company was nothing but a name on a failed website. And my parents? Their house? At risk of foreclosure, their savings frozen, their reputation destroyed. As I walked out, Evan ran after me, his face red, eyes wild. "You ruined my life," he screamed. I turned back, calm as ever. "No, Evan, you did that to yourself." Then I walked away. I had won, and I had never felt freer. Walking away from that party, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. For too long I had let my parents control me with guilt. I had let them manipulate me into thinking I owed them everything. But now they were nothing to me. What happened to my parents? My parents tried everything to get out of the mess they had created. They begged, they pleaded, they even tried to play the victim. But the law doesn't care about excuses. The fraud charges against them? Serious. Even though I could have pressed for jail time, I didn't. Not because I felt mercy, but because what they were going through was worse than any prison sentence. Their accounts remained frozen. Their house, gone. Without access to my stolen money, they couldn't pay the mortgage. They had no choice but to downsize, moving into a tiny apartment, a far cry from the comfortable life they were used to. And the best part? They tried to guilt-trip Evan into helping them, but he was broke too. What happened to Evan? Evan tried to salvage his business, but after that public humiliation, no one wanted to work with him. His investors pulled out, his vendors cut ties, and his friends, who were happy to spend my stolen money, vanished the moment the cash dried up. He tried reaching out to me multiple times. At first, it was angry messages, blaming me for ruining his life. Then it was pathetic apologies, saying we were brothers and needed to stick together. I never responded. As far as I was concerned, I never had a brother. Last I heard, he was working retail, barely scraping by. What happened to me? With my money recovered, I focused on growing my business even further. Without the stress of my family constantly draining me, I could finally breathe. And the best part? I bought a new home, bigger, better, and completely mine. One day, my mother showed up at my doorstep. She looked tired, her once expensive clothes now looking worn out. She started talking, saying she was sorry, that they had learned their lesson. Then, the real reason she was there slipped out. "Alex, we need help." I just looked at her. The same woman who told me I owed them everything. The same woman who stole from me without a second thought. The same woman who had never once defended me when I was being treated like an afterthought. I didn't say anything. I just closed the door in her face. And for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt at all. They took everything from me. So I built a new life, without them. And I never looked back.